Well, we are at our start time, but we are still pretty shy of a quorum. I think we can wait a few more minutes. See what that yields. I did also, just for information, hear from Rondi that she will not be in attendance, and Andrew Manley was also a maybe. But there are good things to discuss, so that would be a shame if they weren't able to attend. And Tom, I know we don't have a parliamentarian, but in terms of meetings that are convened without a quorum that have minutes, do those need to be approved? Because there wouldn't even be enough members present for approval to meet quorum, if that makes sense.
It does, and I had the same question, and I forgot to, I was going to email Lee Baker, our attorney, and ask him his opinion on that, and I forgot to do that today, so.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, approved or not, it's still not an official meeting.
Right.
It wasn't a quorum.
Right.
But I will email him and ask that and let you know what I find out.
Okay, thank you. That would be helpful. And
Does that
also-
mean we don't get paid?
Yes. And really, I mean, we're at 5 minutes past the start time now, so it kind of puts us in a similar situation where we have, at the very least, CAC bylaws that we could discuss, and we could still go through reports, but not if there's a lack of interest in so doing, or any reason not to, I guess. I know there's, again, still not an ability to do any official business, but we could at least still have meaningful conversation about the contents of the question.
John Arnold is a very good guy. He'll probably be here, but don't we have to have 6?
Yes, 6,
Yeah.
and to be able to actually do business. I mean, we can still discuss
And then
things.
along those lines that you bring that up, and since we're in limbo right here, when things start to go back to normal or what have you, when we get to the point where we do those hybrid meetings,
Mhm.
assuming we get to that point, that is for the purpose of having a hybrid meeting, 50% have to be physically present in person, but you still need that 6th one to be either in person or online to have your quorum.
Okay. That's interesting. I don't remember that nuance.
Yeah, it didn't, the open door law where they changed it to allow the hybrids and stuff, it did not address quorums. It just said at least 50% of the body
Okay,
And for most of them, and this one, if you had a full complement, you're going to have an odd number. So 50% means you have a quorum present in the room. But where the CA sits right now with an even number, you can have less than a quorum present and still hold a hybrid meeting, but you have to have somebody, another member online in order to have that quorum.
right. And it's also my understanding, as I was working on the bylaws, it is possible to establish a different quorum than 50% in the bylaws for a governing body. Is that true of this body, or are there other statutes or regulations above it that would supersede that?
Well, I don't know that I'm familiar with what you just referred to.
Oh. Yeah, I've seen bylaws that have a definition of quorum in them, and according to Robert's rules from, if I recall correctly, that is possible to set a non-majority quorum. See if I can locate that.
I will have to research that. Because I would say that it's more likely to be the case acceptable for this body than it is for like our board.
Right.
Our board does not have, the makeup of that board is dictated by state statute, and they don't get to say the three of us get to make a decision. That's all. But since this is an appointed commission, there might be a loophole in there somewhere to do that, or an
Okay.
out. I'll have to look into that. That's another one I can ask Mr. Baker.
Well, good thing we can compile that list now. Yeah, because that crossed my mind, as I know we've had conversations about dealing with attendance, and this is a perfect example of what that looks like. And I know, at least if there was a lot of contention about attendees being permitted abundance of absences, reducing quorum would be a method that would allow business to keep going and having attendees that aren't present. Whereas the alternative would be actually reducing membership to have a quorum of attendees who attend regularly enough.
Yeah.
And which, for the sake of discussion, is where I stand in terms of how to approach a matter of attendance, because personally, I don't see the interest of having members who aren't present regularly and participating regularly. To me, that's integral in what membership is. And I would rather have members be present than allow members to not be present for extended periods, but still maintain membership. And that's a discussion we will definitely need to have when we're deciding on the bylaws, which I'll note that I have a working copy or a working document copy of in the Dropbox, the CAC's Dropbox, which I will upload into chat here for reference.
I would say that has been an issue for many years, and it would be nice to have it sort of neatened up a little bit.
I agree. It looks like we gained Ryan Conway, at least in electronic presence.
You sure did. I've been here for a minute.
Excellent, welcome. I was probably screen sharing and looking at other things, so I apologize for your arrival.
No worries.
And Tom, were you? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with regard to, active membership and participation, I can ask, I've made another note here. I'll ask Mr. Baker about, establishing the criteria to remove a member. I think I think this body should have some latitude with regard to that, but I'm not the attorney, so.
Nor am I. On that note, I actually have a comment in the bylaws working document about exactly that and what the criteria of removal is, or I guess an appointment.
In that draft copy that I sent you once upon a time, I
Mhm.
think they tried to address that in there.
There was a comment, and I'm just trying to find it right now.
And then the other caveat with that is because the members are appointed by the board would be the one that would have to remove somebody.
Yes, so, okay, I found the line, and in the previous draft, it said recommendations for termination for cause of non-attendance shall be forwarded to the board following consensus voting of the committee. And also, there was another one under resignation, that resignation of membership shall be submitted in writing to the board of directors for consideration. But I didn't know if it was up to the board's consideration for resignation.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how you can force somebody that says I'm done to continue.
Right, that was what I found curious about the particular phrasing of that line. And those are
Wonder if it
points.
had something to do more with like the board officially opening up in a spot if we were full. I mean, that would make sense more than approving someone leaving.
Yeah, and I don't know that I have a hard time envisioning a circumstance in which the board would refuse somebody's resignation.
Sure. That makes sense to me too. And I was mostly thinking in terms of just having a clear guiding document just to preclude those cases from being questions if they should arise in the future.
Oh, no, I agree. And in going a little bit further, I would even say that once the CAC has agreed on, what they think is reasonable criteria, before the bylaws are approved, we probably ought to run those by at least the executive committee, if not the board, and make sure that they're in agreement.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Ryan, just to catch you up, obviously we're short of quorum. We haven't officially convened the meeting. We're having informal conversation about presently the bylaws, but there is also, actually, maybe jump to the first order of business informally, and that is the signatures for the electronic attendance resolution 2021-01. Which, Tom, as of your last update, both Nelson and Ryan were needing signatures added. So I just wanted to create an opportunity to be able to discuss if that has happened, and if not, what we can do to facilitate that happening.
Got it done, brother.
Yeah,
Nice.
Ryan's got his, and I meant to check that before I left the office and I forgot. I know John Arnold has not, but he and I talked. He's going to come do his recycling at South Walnut on Saturday, and I will leave the folder over there with them so he can go in and sign it then. So Nelson, I don't know. I didn't look, so I don't know if you have come in and signed or not yet.
Nope.
And
I will come and see you next. Yeah, well, maybe later this week.
I mean, and obviously it's something we need to get done, but it's not a pressing matter until we get to the point that we're ready to start doing hybrid meetings. Because if there's no hybrid meeting, the content of that is irrelevant. But, and I do recall from last time I looked at it, Lauren Cott was the only member not present at that meeting. So she doesn't need to come in and sign either way.
Right, okay. Okay. Yeah, aside from that, then just conversation about bylaws. And yeah, I think I'll hold off on the apartment recycling content until there's more members present.
Since you brought it up, I'll just delve a little bit into the apartment recycling, because the way you worded it on the agenda says that an initiative, and I don't know that we have that yet. We may,
Oh.
I mean, but And you were at the last executive committee meeting, which was really the first discussion that we'd had on it, certainly since the plan had been adopted. And so we're still formulating. I mean, obviously there's agreement across the board that the district can do more and should do more, to try to hit apartment residents and make them aware of us and what we offer, let alone trying to encourage them to utilize us or do something. So I don't know that we have an initiative per se yet. We're trying to figure that out right now.
I didn't
And
intend to
obviously,
imply. Oh, go
yeah, I
ahead.
mean, and comments, suggestions, from the CAC with regard to how or what the district can do are certainly welcome.
Yeah, I know off the top of my head, again, having been present at the executive meeting, when you were mentioning the potential of, or discussing the potential of finding a site within the city limits for a full service equivalent version of the district's recycling facilities. That crossed my mind in terms of cost to benefit ratio, in terms of that being at least an infrastructurally and personnel very cost heavy solution to providing recycling or to augmenting recycling service, and not exclusively as a means of providing more methods or outlets for doing the recycling. But I was just thinking across the board in terms of all expenses of all of the goals possible, sort of an impact and prioritization of if there are other initiatives that would produce a higher yield for that equivalent investment, if that makes sense.
It does. And yeah, I mean, and whether it's something that's geared toward apartments or anything, establishing an additional facility is not going to be cheap.
Right.
It's not going to break the bank, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of upfront, startup costs on that. And, and so, for, since it came up as a part of the apartment discussion, obviously location is going to be key. We don't want to make that investment in an area that's, going to serve 100 units. We need to find, we need to find an area where multiple apartment complexes are reasonably close and it's a convenient drop-off location to try and encourage, all of those residents to use us.
And there was previously a recycling center near City Hall, if I recall correctly.
Yes, Chad Roeder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was in the parking lot of it was on the west side parking lot of the Showers complex.
Okay.
And I think that, I mean, well, it was not the district's facility. I mean, we helped out. We leased some, very inexpensively, but leased some of the roll-off boxes and stuff to Chad to set that up. And I think that financially he was struggling with it. And about that same time, the city came in with, I don't know what ideas they had, and basically said they wanted their parking lot back. And he wasn't in a position with the trend of what he was seeing at the site and financially that it wasn't worth it to him to put up too much of an argument on that, is my recollection. But yeah, and and now that you say that, Chad is still around in town as far as I know.
Mhm.
And so maybe I'll reach out to him and see if he still has any data. Maybe he can give us some tonnages, what kind of volume he was running through that facility, to give us an idea of what we might be looking at if we did something.
Yeah, that was precisely my thought along those lines in terms of getting a baseline on how productive that particular site was.
Tom, was Chad on the CAC for a while? Did he ever get on this, or did he just do his thing and kind of intersected?
I don't recall
anecdotally?
him ever being on the CAC.
Okay. And then there's also what comes. I mean, I'm trying to think of centralized locations, and of course, the hospital redevelopment site. Could be a potential. I don't know exactly at what speed the city is planning on going through whatever remediation would be necessary for that level of a site. But there's also, I know, some brownfield that's right next to the B line just south of Kroger too. That I don't know if I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a real estate guy. I'm just kind
Well,
of tossing that
I
stuff.
mean, yeah, I guess part of it is determining, I mean, is it something that we want to do to specifically target apartment residents? In which case, the hospital site may not be ideal because there's not a lot of apartments in that vicinity.
True.
But if it's something that we want to make a little bit broader and just, expand access by having more drop-off facilities, then that opens up a lot more areas.
Nice.
Now I'll back up some and just, again, it's not something that means we stop looking at this and pursuing it, but there is a clause in the host fee agreement with Republic that basically says we can't open an additional facility without their consent. So that is a hurdle that we'll have to overcome to do this. But the flip side of that is they're also contracted to manage all of our materials and transport all of our materials. So if we open an additional facility, they're still getting all of that material. So hopefully there won't be a great deal of fuss over that.
Nice.
And I do want to say a quick hello to John as well. Thank you for making it, and to let you know that we are still shy of quorum, haven't officially convened the meeting, and we're just having informal discussions about the content of the agenda, which I can share with you if you need to see a copy. But presently, the District Department Recycling Initiative is what we're talking about. Oh, it looks like you're still on mute.
There, how's that?
You are unmuted and we can hear you.
Okay. So we don't have a quorum even yet.
Correct. We are at 5, which is precisely half of our membership and does not constitute a majority.
Well, that's too bad. I made sure I would be here this time since I missed last month, so.
I appreciate that effort. I'm glad that we're almost there. Is there anything in particular you would like to weigh in on while you're present?
Not right now.
All right. And Lily or Nelson, did you have the opportunity to review the bylaws working doc to see what the recompiled and proposed information is so far?
It looks
I did.
fine. I haven't gone through it with a brown fine tooth comb.
Okay. Lily?
Yeah, I did. I agreed with your comments that were listed on the side. And I looked a little bit at some of the other districts that were posted up as already template sort of options in that Dropbox file. Yeah, it just seems like shoring up what it means to be a member. And I think that's why we dropped working on these last time, because we installed this, like, I can't remember, Tom would know what it was, like inactive member, where you were still on the CAC, but you didn't count for quorum, and it just kind of made it a mess. So I don't think that ever got approved as bylaws, but I think this time really focusing in on, I think it was pretty clear. It said, if you miss more than 50% of meetings in half a year or something, you may be asked to leave. And that makes sense to me. Because surely there would be people in the community who would be available on the general day and time that we meet and interested in coming. And I'm not really sure. I know that our group is actually a lot bigger than who normally show up at the meetings. So finding out from some of those people, are you still interested? And yeah.
Yeah, the inactive status thing was a challenge. And my recollection is we had at least one, if not two members that were battling some pretty major health issues at the time, but they were, and before they had their health issues, they were very active members of the group, and they didn't want to remove them, but didn't want them to be an obstacle to having a quorum at any given meeting.
I just don't think we highlighted enough that maybe it was meant to be like that extenuating circumstance of, I have an extended illness, I don't anticipate coming, because it sort of just became like, well, that sounds good, I can be on it. And not everyone, most people were still part, but really clarifying, if we had something like that, what does it mean? Like, is it just for anyone, or do you need almost some sort of exemption for why you're going to be an inactive member? Because of course it could sound fun to be listed as a member, but just not come to meetings anymore.
I wish they'd let me do that for my job.
Yeah, exactly.
In my case, it would be a resume enhancer, not to go to work.
But I agree, and but at the same time, when those situations arise for somebody, you want to have the ability to grant them some sort of a leave of absence or something where, they're not active, but they're not counting against you when you're trying to have a meeting and have an official meeting.
So maybe that would be a good addition to the document, would be, how to go about requesting a leave of absence, so that because I don't think that's in there at all. The inactive part isn't either, but making that clear, because we do have some really great people right now who, if we had something if something came up for someone, maybe including that, like, how can I be a member, but ask for a leave of absence? So that might be under, I guess, the membership requirements, where that would slide in above officers.
I've added that as another question for Mr. Baker.
He's going to be busy. Yeah, that would be interesting. My instinct is to say, essentially, being absent and not voting is the same as not being a member, because the only difference between membership is that you have the right to vote. I mean, the public is welcome, and these are publicly accessible, so anyone, if they're interested, can attend. And the only thing they would relinquish as non-members would be the right to vote. But if they're not present, they're not voting, so it's virtually indistinguishable, provided that it doesn't prevent them from becoming reappointed at some point in the future. Say they do need a leave of absence, they can simply resign for a period and then ask for appointment by the board and then be restored at some point in the future. I don't know if that is a significant headache to go that route instead of defining a sort of leave of absence if the statute permits it.
I mean, the only issue I see with it is, looking forward and assuming at some point, we have a full CAC, 13 or 15, whatever that number is, but if you're at your 15 members and, somebody's going through cancer treatment or something, and I need, 9 months, and then if they resign, you don't want the board to fill that spot, because then until the term, at that point, the spot is filled until the term expires unless somebody resigns.
Right, gotcha.
But I do envision, if then soon we go back to in-person meetings, that it would be really handy to be able to not include that person for this quorum, because I think we will find that we have some adjusting to getting enough people coming in person. So yeah, I guess I see both the points, but yeah.
Obviously, it's one of those things that you hope you never have to deal with, but unfortunately, we have in the past, and the solution we came up with that time turned out to not work out as well as we'd intended. So other options would be good to consider.
Sure. And there's no precedent of something equivalent within the districts or other governing bodies that you're aware of, Tom?
No, I mean, because the board is it, and they're, they're on there by virtue of their elected office, and they don't get to take a leave of absence.
I suppose that makes sense. It's a very different role. Well, we are halfway through our scheduled meeting time, still shy of quorum. Those who were maybes are now present. And I'd say at this point, if anyone has further items to informally discuss, we can continue. I have the time allotted to this, but if not, I think it's also reasonable to depart if you have other engagements or activities. I will leave it up to those present to volunteer information if they have any.
I have an 8th grade band concert at 7:30.
Ooh. I hate to get in the way of that. And Nelson, I saw you speak, but you were still muted. So I didn't hear what you had to say.
Do you keep track of who's here when there isn't an official meeting? Because I've been to most of these. I'd hate to get chopped.
Yeah, I don't think attendance is recorded if no meeting is convened.
Okay.
Well, I think Nelson brings up a good point, and particularly if we want to look at implementing some sort of a policy to remove members, then you're going to have to start tracking that, because you're going to have to document when somebody was absent.
It's true. Yeah, I don't know. Again, maybe a question for Mr. Baker, but is there a statutory definition of absence? Like, does the meeting have to be, of course, I could convene a meeting. I suppose that's not difficult if that's what it takes. But
well,
yeah,
I mean, the meetings are scheduled, and everybody's noticed. They're all advertised. I mean, this isn't like we called this meeting last Thursday on the spur of the moment and people had to scramble. That it's one thing when you call special meetings and somebody's not available, but when people reach out to me, contact me about interest in joining the CAC, I mean, you go through and they meet once a month, and currently it's the 3rd Thursday, but the expectation is that they'll be or at one time semi-monthly, but we'll go over what the time commitment is.
okay.
And so the scheduling of them is one thing, but hopefully there aren't people on the CAC that say nobody told me there'd be a monthly meeting.
And typically we have, meeting, they're not minutes, but notes from this sort of meeting that never really becomes official. And so, that attendance should maybe still be listed on that, of who was at this meeting that wasn't official.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe I can ask Mr. Baker, how when we don't have a quorum and how do we officially document attendance for a non-official meeting?
Right. And timing as well, in terms of at what point in time is one considered absent, as opposed to if one arrives, 20 minutes late, they'll be marked as absent at the start of the meeting, but are they present if they've missed a third or half of the meeting? That's another hair to split.
My first thought on that is that, I mean, that's probably something that could be defined in the bylaws.
Okay. Party status.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that shows up more than 15 minutes after the meeting start time will, be considered, tardy or Yeah, it depends on what you're doing in there, why are you tracking it? And then you just relate it back to, one strike toward being removed, or, just kind of depends on what's the purpose of tracking that and why are we putting this caveat in there? You got to relate it back to that other section.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, as it's written now, the bylaws are mostly oriented around just 2/3 majority voting for dealing with membership problems. So it's not that there's a fast and hard regulation on if you have this many of, this type of infraction, you are eligible for dismissal, so much as just tracking for building a case, so that if 2/3 of the body decide that someone's behavior or tendencies are problematic, that can be addressed just by a majority vote on a cause that the members deem worthy. Again, I don't know of statutes or other inherent policies that would limit that, but that's the approach that I've taken so far in the draft that I've created.
I'm not aware of anything in the statutes. Doesn't mean they're not there. We'll have to do some research on that, but I think that's the right approach, and and even if somebody disagrees that with a recommendation to remove them, it's not done, as we said earlier, it's not done by this body. All this body will do is make a recommendation to the board, and that member would have the opportunity at that board meeting, to state their case to remain on the committee. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, that seems fair. I mean, it's not like we vote and you're out then. They would have a chance to say, why they've been gone or.
I mean, unless Lee Baker says otherwise, my assumption is that the board appoints, so the board has to remove.
Does sound reasonable.
Well, and we haven't had a lot of business to conduct, but we can't make official business if we don't have a quorum. So yeah, this could get sticky.
Well, it could. I mean, I guess my hope is that now we have, the plan adopted, and we have some things, out there to work toward, that there'll be more things, for the CAC to get involved in, and and help the district move toward achieving a lot of the things that are in that plan. And there'll be more, more to do, and more purpose, more reason for having quorums and for people attending and giving their input. And I mean, that's what the body is for, to give citizen input to the district and its board as they make decisions and move forward with whatever is determined that's needed for the community with waste management and recycling.
Yeah, I would generally disagree with the statement that we don't have much business to discuss. I feel like for the foreseeable future, there will be something that we can meaningfully discuss and collectively decide on as a body to, like Tom said, direct the district. And presently, we in the last meeting or last regular session was also not convened for the same reason. So we're still not even able to adopt bylaws to just kind of give structure to the body to be able to move forward with those things. So I feel like we're already going to be a couple months behind of being able to make collective recommendations and suggestions to the district.
And the other thing too is, if the body doesn't feel that the district, that, whether, me or staff or the board, is providing enough guidance, enough tasks or projects, there's nothing to prevent the CAC from coming to the board with an idea. Can we do this? That's certainly within your purview to suggest things to the board.
Yeah, I think we've already had a great opportunity to do that through the goals and objectives of the 5-year plan. That's why I feel like there's so much that we're able to contribute to already.
Well, yeah, I know, but I mean, even, beyond that, if the, if the CAC wanted to, and I'll just throw, if the CAC wanted to work with, since Paul brought it up before, if the CAC wanted to work with Hilly 100 to do recycling during that event, there's absolutely no reason that you can't come to the board and say, hey, as a group, this is something we're interested in and we want to do, with, the district has the toters, the clear stream recycle bins that could be made available, and can the CAC use district resources and try to make this happen with Hilly 100? There's no reason that you can't do that. Worst thing to do is they say no,
Yeah, I would love for this body to have that level of engagement. And I know I always mention it, or I often at least mention it in the meeting notice messages, that agenda items are available, or agenda item suggestions are accepted at any time. So I don't want to give the impression that this is the chair's show who, sets up what gets discussed so much as just
You're not a
facilitates what's
dictator?
discussed. Not yet. At least I hope I'm not perceived as one.
So, yeah, but I guess, I'm just saying, don't feel that you're bound or locked in to whatever the district's currently doing or working on. If the CAC has other thoughts and other ideas, it is within your purview to bring those to the board, and see if the board is interested in moving forward with anything.
Thank you for the reminder, Tom. That's good to hear. I think for me, that concludes the informal conversation of things that I had wanted to discuss anyway. Obviously, there are still comments in the draft of the bylaws that I'd be interested in feedback on, but is there anything else that anybody else would like to discuss? All right, well, I think we can disband. And I want to say thank you all for your time and attendance.